Hey, what's up, guys? This is Music Sucks and I Want to Die. We're back again. I'm Jake.
I'm Matt.
And today, we have a very, very special guest, all the way from Seattle, Washington. Yeah. His name is Nate Omdal, and he is a bass player and works for the Union. And why don't you tell us a little more about yourself?
I'm a bass player.
And you work
for the Union. Let's hear. I moved to Seattle in 2001 to attend Cornish College of the Arts.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think we've all sweated through that place. So yeah, that was 2001. So that's a little more than 20 years ago when I started there. But just lucky enough to get in with some musicians that are playing a lot of gigs around town, and kind of just got stuck. I started working at the Union about 10 years ago.
Nice.
And it's been really a great experience. So which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah. What do you do at the Union exactly?
I have sort of two titles. I was hired originally as the organizer a handful of years ago, and then last year I was elected vice president.
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Congrats.
serving
Nice.
dual roles.
We got
right now.
royalty in the room.
That's right.
Not quite royalty. Not quite royalty.
Do you want to start just like kind of a brief history of music unions in general?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I know
Sure.
you
Yeah.
kind of
Just give you the broad strokes on it.
Yeah. Just like started.
The Musicians Union, the American Federations of Musicians of the United States and Canada, is a fairly old labor union as far as labor unions go. Some of the oldest ones have founding dates that go back 125, 150 years to this point now. Seattle's local was actually founded in 1885. So there's,
I did not know that. That's
there's
crazy.
been a musicians union in town since then. Over the years, there's actually was a merger in the I think late 40s. Many organizations that were around in the 30s and 40s were unfortunately segregated, and the Seattle Musicians Union was no different. But in the 40s, we rectified that, and the two have been combined as 76493, which is our number that we carry right now, and the 493 was the African American Union.
Oh, cool.
So, but yeah, we've been. In the community, for like 1885. That's 125
I know
years.
went that far back. That's crazy.
That's awesome, dude.
Do you know off the top of your head about how many members you have right now?
It fluctuates. Right now we're still sort of dealing with pandemic numbers. Before that, we had several hundred musicians, close to 4, sometimes in the 5, depending on the territory. Of course, there's musicians, locals. All across the United States.
Sure.
It's just sliced up like a big weird pizza. Our territory actually extends, I would just kind of say, roughly through about middle of the state, going east, and again, maybe 2/3 down going south. So roughly, in my mind,
big,
it's sort of like, Leavenworth to Centralia.
Oh,
And then
okay.
we actually do represent Alaska.
Oh, really?
All
That's
of
interesting.
Alaska. Yeah.
Nice.
That was sort of a unfortunate COVID situation there. We sort of had to pick that territory up, and hopefully we'll be able to return it to musicians out there so they can represent their own region, because that's something that we all believe in across the federation, is that each territory has their own unique issues and unique opportunities.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And the best way to represent the musicians in that territory is to have local folks there doing the work.
So I am completely 100% ignorant of the union and everything that is involved with it. And I guess I'm just going to start off why would I sign up? Like, what you know what I mean? What would I get out of it,
Sure. We can start. There's that's a big question.
Yeah. So we can narrow it down a little bit. Yeah.
So traditionally what unions do is they represent employed workers. So if you think about, an easy one would be sort of Boeing locally. That's an easy one. Or teachers, nurses. We all see those struggles in media, that kind of
Starbucks,
Amazon. Exactly. Those are really great examplos of unions representing workers today. In the music trade, what that often looks like is, in Los Angeles, that would be the studio musicians that are recording for the major movie studios, or actually it's the contracts cover the whole country for record label recordings. So studio musicians are covered. I know my colleagues down in Orange County represent the musicians at the Disneyland Park. And likewise their counterparts in Florida represent at Disney. So there's a handful of those sort of units across the country. In Seattle we have an awful lot of musical theater work. We represent the musicians in the musical theater, Paramount, Fifth Avenue, Village. Yep, all those places. So if you are interested in doing that kind of work, that would be covered by the AFM.
Okay.
And we do have some, and we're hoping to grow that resource pile for freelancers, which is something I know that everybody at this table certainly does.
Yeah, that's
That's a little bit harder, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we go.
Yeah.
But in a lot of lenses, the music trade is no different than electricians or plumbers or any other way you'd earn a living, especially if you're working in one of those production houses where you are being employed. There was a really great example of unions in action. It was a couple of years ago. I always find it to be a really, really great example of just how, I guess, granular the problems can be sometimes. And that's where it takes a union that's an expert in the field to step in. And the example I use is the musicians that were working on The Rise of Skywalker were being compensated differently than the musicians that were being compensated on the first season of The Mandalorian.
Really?
Okay.
Oftentimes, it's the same musicians getting the same calls, right?
Right.
It's the same studios, the same composers, the same production houses. But because of the type of market that The Mandalorian was being released on, streaming directly to Disney Plus, that's a much different contract than the contract that's been worked on and enforced for a century that would represent for theatrical release. So the musicians union stepped in and said, hey, wait a second. You're hiring the same musicians to play the same parts by the same composers in the same it's same. The only thing that's different is that now in 2020 when that came out, we have this new platform, this new market of streaming. And it took the musicians union to say, hold on, we might need to actually stop and strike, maybe perform some out-of-tune versions of the band theme in front of some Disney executive's house.
Nice.
Talk to a couple of police officers along the way. That certainly happened. And it took actions like that to resolve that so that they became covered to the extent that the musicians that were covering the theatrical release did.
I imagine going forward as we get new types of media, that'll probably come up a lot more going in the future too.
Yeah, I mean,
Just like a streaming in general.
We're at a really interesting
such a
time
recent thing,
right now in the
really.
industry. I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers could attest to, and the technology is changing things really fast right now.
seems like it's every 5 years it's brand new. Yeah.
And the pandemic actually kind of forced a lot of people to consider consuming music in some different ways that are not necessarily uncomfortable. Well, like if you get it in your house, you have it in your living room, if it's streaming, if it's more on your computer, if it's more of a digital interaction.
For sure.
Well, those are new. And
I mean, I'm sure the metaverse when that we all get on that, but something like that might happen. These sort of augmented reality things and like
a lot of there's a lot of conversations. How do you protect musicians that may be participating on Twitch?
Oh yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I know.
Those are all questions that we're trying to answer in what the musician union is today, and there are no easy answers. But there are no easy answers in any part of the music trade.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the work that we do and how we try to carry forward.
I had a question. So I was doing a little research on history of unions, and I think it was in New York during early 20th century or something. But they had a big push to sort of consolidate venue pay, or like at least get a standard kind of thing going. And it's not something I've ever encountered here. I mean, any place I go here will obviously be very different depending on what kind of thing it is.
For sure, yeah.
I don't know, is that still a thing? Is that something you guys maybe are looking towards, or like a minimum wage or something like that?
Yeah. So one thing I always bring up when I have to speak at like a college or give like a presentation is that there are, and I've referenced this already, there in the federal lens, there are two types of workers. There are employees and there are contractors. When you are an employee, there are a lot easier pathways for worker protection, like around minimum wages. There's even something in other trades called a prevailing wage, which would be something that we would love to see established in music, where like plumbers that would set up a new shop in any city couldn't start below the prevailing wage line.
That'd be nice. Yeah. So no undercutting.
So no undercutting.
Yeah.
Exactly. Other trades have these things.
Yeah.
Because music is what it is, and I'm not saying that it's all bad because of the way it is, but the nature of our trade is that entry is sort of how it comes to you as a musician. Like it's not like you have to go to a if you're an electrician, you would need to get licensed. If you're a plumber, you need to get licensed. Certain trades come with certain certificates that are easier to say, well, this new worker has it.
Yeah.
So they're eligible for work A, B, and C.
Right.
Our trade is a little different.
I think we actually talked about that once, a long time ago. Is like in some weird dream world we have, people who are just god awful, like not being able to play. Obviously, that's impossible.
Yeah,
and,
but
who's going to judge all that stuff? But
But yeah, that's an interesting question though. How do you get that?
How do you
in that
control
setting?
the quality, and what does quality even mean?
I think we've all been a part and seen some shows where we might not have been huge fans of the music being performed on stage.
Yeah.
It might not be to a quality that we ourselves might not hold ourselves to, but you look around and everybody's enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly. So who are we? And
who are you? So those kind of realities of our trade make it complicated.
Yeah, whether if you're like an electrician or something, you do something, you perform a task, it's very easy to measure what's happened.
Right, and there's a whole industry around it that you can kind of weigh your price against.
Yeah.
And those are also some things that the Musicians Union tries to do. We have a wage scale book where we have musicians from the community. We're actually in the process of finalizing our wage scale for the next couple of years right now, where we would say for doing work that was in a large venue. That's one of my favorite categories because it describes, in my opinion, it's a pretty rough summary of what working in one of our larger venues is going to look like. You're going to be there for X amount of time at a minimum, right? So we have what we call a minimum call.
Okay. Yeah,
so you can't, as the employer or the purchaser, you couldn't drop below that and say, oh, we only want you for an hour, because there's no way that you're going to get in and out of the Tacoma Dome in an hour.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? That's a large venue, or the Paramount,
anywhere.
Or the
anywhere
Art
really.
If you play Skylark, you're
exactly.
going to.
There's some rates that are set aside with some premiums that go along with going in doing certain types of work. So we have that tool that we hope could go towards informing something like a standardized wage. In the freelance world, a lot of the leverage that a regular worker has, it's harder for us to access. So I tell you, that's what I've been working on for the last couple of years, is trying to find ways to level that field so that musicians as workers could ask for some of the same protections that any other worker in society has. Like, we've all had some surprise deductions at the end of the night playing some gigs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Usually those are like I haven't had anything like that happen since I stopped playing at kind of smaller bars and stuff.
We all sort of, a lot of us that have some degree of training and are in the trade as a career do tend to kind of age out of that opportunity a little bit for a lot of reasons. Maybe you start a family, you just need to find better work, or you're proficient and play, and you start finding better opportunities. There's a lot of reasons that happens, but that still doesn't mean that predatory environment's not sitting there waiting for the next young person coming along.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of what I see as a union officer, is how, I mentioned I moved to Seattle in 2001, so that's 21 years ago, and that's long enough to see multiple classes of musicians, we'll say, but from a college level, cycle through the city and see the same problem that we heard all of our professors talking about, pay not going up for so long. And there's actually some pretty direct reasons why pay hasn't gone up since the 80s. In the early 80s, there were some federal court decisions that made the venues not a part of the employment process.
Interesting.
So when we hear or people that are our professors' age say pay hasn't gone up since the early 80s, well, that was when there were some pretty
was
major
intentional, I guess.
federal
Yeah.
court decisions that made the band leader the employer and not the venue.
Interesting. And that's another thing we've touched on in the past is like who's like more responsible for like a crowd coming out? Is it your venue or is it your band? On a smaller level, it would seem that the venue would be more responsible, but that's not the way it's currently structured. Pay wise, it's not currently structured any other way too, like promotional wise.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one plus every place is different. Like even on like a bar venue, it's sometimes cut at the door, part of the bar, or direct,
I suppose
flat rate. You know, so
it's hard to speak to the whole trade in kind of
when it's so
a broad stroke like that. There is a couple of points that are important to the state, and that's a lens that I always try to look at, or you keep in mind, because that's how that's how they're going to look at us if we took a problem to them.
sure.
Does that make sense? So one of the things that the state asks a worker if you've been treated unfairly is, were you in a place where what you were doing was essential to that business? That's a big checkbox.
Yeah.
Are we ever not? I mean, if you're at a music venue,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more important than having music.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Oh yeah, it doesn't exist otherwise.
So
yeah.
The more we can learn about, well, you know, how would an electrician approach the same problem? Because electricians have some similar situations, a lot of contracting in that trade. When something happens in that field, what do they do? Or are there parallels? I've actually been trying to discover if there's a parallel from the state's perspective between bringing your own drills to a construction site.
Bring your own gear.
Just bring your own gear.
Yeah. Well,
It's interesting.
it's
Yeah.
tools. I mean,
So all of those things are a part of some of that wage question that you asked. Why is it such a
oh yeah, it's a huge
why is it such a
complicated
roll
topic.
the dice
Yeah.
every time you go out there and try to work up
Yeah.
until you establish or have representation or whatever the case may be. And again, the problem is it just leaves a huge question mark for the people that are coming up. So just trying to come up with some answers from a larger place that can say, hey, the next generation of kids coming in, like, you can't keep them poor.
Yeah.
Especially if we want to keep this city vibrant.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even make it more vibrant.
Would be nice.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question, kind of going off just a little bit. So do you guys at the AFM like partner with like advocacy groups and like local grants, things like that? And do you guys work together? Is there like synergy there?
Sure. There's a yes and a no in that. The first thing I would say is that a union is not a nonprofit. Like something
Like Arts Washington. Yeah.
something like exactly. Yeah, we have completely different tax statuses. One of the things that a union can do, you know, if you as a worker are having some sort of action like a strike, we can actually protect your employment, so that you can't get fired. And if a musician is classified as a worker and they're trying to solve a problem on the work site, we can protect that person's job in the process of advocating for that improvement. That's one of the things that we can do that a nonprofit can't do. So because of that, we there are certain things that unions you won't see. It's just a harder thing for them to do, like put on a show. That's something that actually I wish we had more freedom to do, and there's some ways around that we're actively pursuing, learning from some of our colleagues. But that makes some kind of partnerships a little bit out of reach. So we tend to partner with groups that are more like SMASH, Seattle Musicians, Affordable Sustainable Healthcare, just to make sure there our members, and by proxy their families and their colleagues, have access to some of the resources that are in the city. So you might find us doing more on partnering in that kind of an action than we're trying to raise money for something.
So for X project.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, could you tell us a little bit more about SMASH?
I can briefly.
Yeah, just a brief,
you know, we've collaborated with them. I know that they Smash is a great organization that has some emergency healthcare services that are available for Seattle musicians. Dental, eye care. They have periodic
really?
screenings. In the past, they've had custom fittings for hearing protection.
Oh,
wow,
And
that's
they've had recently one of their more recent events was a whole screening at I can't remember what the clinic was. It's on Madison. There's a hearing health clinic that's
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and they went in there and gave you the whole beep and buzz test.
Oh
and
God,
said,
I'd be afraid to go in
this
there.
is good or this is bad. And it was a service, and they could recommend doing these things. Man, I had a conversation with one of the doctors there who just told me this, just some pretty amazing stuff about direct in-ear monitorings that are coming out now, that are coming up, that are for you and what your damage is, but also your instrument. Because he was telling me he's an upright bassist. He was like, it might look a little weird, but there's a thing that if we put like something in your bass,
Yeah, I've heard of these.
and then ran a tube into your ear, it would just be the best monitoring system in the world. And it was just so fascinating to hear him talk about your acoustic instrument.
Yeah, I never
does
thought
these
something,
things.
but yeah, well, that's
but they
interesting.
also can take it, break a tooth. You know what I mean? You're in a lot of pain.
Bar fights when they don't pay.
Yeah,
That's right. When you fight with the owner, that's right. Hell yeah.
Absolutely. So check out Smash, because they're definitely a really wonderful
Yeah,
organization.
that's great. Yeah, I had no idea that existed. That's awesome.
Yeah. So back to me, of course. No. So the only union I've ever actually participated in, and I'm kind of by proxy, is when I play with the Seattle Symphony, and they have me pay union dues for their union.
Sure.
Which I don't think I get any benefits from, so it's kind of whatever. But I'm just I'm a side man there. But as I understand it, there is a bit of history between the AFM and what is now the International Guild of Symphony Player. I don't remember the rest of the acronym.
Sure.
But
Yeah. Well, first, I would say, even for a rank and file member like yourself, I would correct
Grunt.
you and say that you're not your whole wage
Oh, I see.
would not be there.
Sure, I
without-
didn't think about that.
Didn't think about that. That's right.
So I just do want to point that out.
Yeah.
I do know that you have enjoyed some parking privileges.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Also, I'm sure something that was a part of the collective
Yeah,
bargaining
although I do
agreement.
still pay for parking there, but much less. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of things that are on a work site that the union puts in place. A union has to bargain for everybody. They can't just bargain for their members. So if you're working
Gotcha.
there, you're benefiting from
What's gone before
what's
me,
gone
yeah.
before you, and what's going to come after you. So the dues really, in my eyes, I say it's usually such a small portion of your paycheck.
It's very small. I pay like $8 when I play there. It's,
And you're complaining.
I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing it out.
So, but what I like to point, for me, I've always thought about it as just a very small way of putting your money where your mouth is.
Yes. And no, I'm totally
you
fine with it,
as most musicians complain, I'm sure we're going to do more of.
Oh, yeah.
When
favorite.
there's a solution and that's present, that's as small as union dues, I'm always like, boy, that really is, for $15 a month, does give me an opportunity to put my money where my mouth is in a small way. And I can show up and say, I'm a member of this organization, I'm a member of this guild, and this is why this is important. And that does amplify your voice a bit.
I mean, it's a thing they always say about everything too, but they're like, yeah, $15 a month or whatever, it's like a couple cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's nothing. And to really, like you're saying, benefit everyone.
Just to cover it now, and I'm
Yeah.
sure I'll want to cover it before the podcast is over, our dues are $50 a quarter.
That's it.
That's it.
So it's like, what, 16, 17 a month. So yeah, it's literally coffee on a busy gigging day.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Yeah, it's nothing.
spent
yeah.
more than that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's
yeah, a
not
Jack
a
in the
lot.
Box at 3 a.m.
I've heard some folks say it's hundreds of dollars, right? No, it's $200 a year. I think it's 180 something a year.
Yeah.
So
So, do you have any like dream projects? Like, let's say like membership was kicking. Let's say you like fucking got 1,000 members like in the next couple of years or whatever. Like that increases your power and all that stuff. Increases your
Huge.
funds.
That's huge.
And then like, are there any projects that are like a dream for the AFM in Seattle here? Like,
Yeah. Do you want? Man, I really shouldn't talk about this.
I like it. I like when people spill the beans.
One of the things that I've been trying to chase down is the answer to why can venues have bands pay for their support staff?
Could you give an example of that?
Like you book a gig and there's a room fee that's $200 that ultimately pays for the sound crew or the bouncer.
Sound crew and the bouncer.
Right.
Yeah. Why is that so? Because as I was talking about earlier, the state has some boxes that are very easy to check in some cases. Actually, there are 6 boxes that the state has that describe or don't describe your relationship to working at this place. What I've been working on for the last several weeks now has been doing some research to try to figure out, well, what makes us, I alluded to this earlier, what makes us different from a carpenter who brings a power tool to a job site, or a teacher who brings a laptop to a job site. One of the boxes that the state looks at is how much equipment in your work does the employer or potential employer provide.
Yeah.
So if I had instantaneous more resources, it's really not money that I'm after. It's voices.
Sure, yeah.
That could say, this is a big problem. Another thing I've worked on in the past is the rubber stamp at the door on your hand. The state actually requires a piece of paper called a receipt that go along with every point of sale in the state. How many times ever have you ever, outside of maybe a major venue like the Paramount that's got ticketing with fine print on the back? Well, Washington State requires for every point of sale, there's a total, there's any service charges, there's the admission, and there's taxes. None of those.
Yeah, I've never seen one.
Never. Not once in my life. Yeah.
Never.
That's how the state knows that an employer, a business, is accurately reporting their taxes, is those receipts. So one of the things I would love to see with amplified voices is the call for oversight from some bodies that already exist that don't have every resource in the world, but to point out how many workers actually do work in the nightlife trade, how many of how many musician workers, creative workers work in the nightlife trade, to just bring some eyes into what we're doing. And I know that might mean that as musicians, we might need to change some of our business habits.
Fair.
But I do think that more musicians than not would appreciate not starting in a $250 to $400 hole.
Yeah.
Sometimes being presented with a bill at the end of the night to make up the difference.
Hey, that's happened to me. Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
You should not be billed to pay for a bouncer.
Yeah.
No,
which in my opinion fits every point of the state's employee criteria test.
Yeah.
So if we can elevate the noise and the advocacy around that practice, like we did with non-compete clauses or blackout dates, as they're commonly referred to in our trade. I'm not sure if you were aware or your listeners are aware, but in 2019, the state made those unenforceable.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I did not know
So
that.
if one of the music festivals or anybody hears this in Washington, if you're working for a club or a festival or any type of employer who tries to restrict the work that you can take for longer than 3 days, there's a small carve out for the creative industry for the weekend, which I actually
that's fair,
think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, totally fair.
Most musicians that are playing a major festival aren't going to go book a second gig tomorrow night.
Yeah.
You're just going to be flat on the floor.
Yeah, you did,
right?
yeah.
Or you're going to be on a plane going to your next gig. Right?
Totally.
So it's if that's anybody gets dealt one of those, pull out a big black Sharpie, cross it out, and call it Nate at the Musicians Union.
Totally. And that was, at the time, in 2019, I actually remember I was talking with a couple of friends who were playing Capitol Hill Block Party, which was a particularly egregious offense of, I want to say 135 days on either side of the
that
gig.
was
Something like that. I remember when we
well, that
played
was the
it.
thing,
Yeah, it was huge.
It was, like, that's half the year, right? On both sides of that?
It was something
And it's not like
something
the
crazy
summer
like
months
that.
are important months for Northwest
Oh, yeah,
musicians.
No,
right.
of course not. Yeah, literally like the only times of the year you play outdoor shows. Yeah. So that was excellent timing.
Yeah,
because it was getting really bad.
Yeah, I was The only thing that I would say was unfortunate about that ruling was that it happened. It took effect about 90 days before the pandemic really hit.
Yeah.
So the word and the rollout got a little muddled on that.
Yeah, I never
so
heard
a couple
about
of years
that.
after the fact, it may have gotten a little shoved under the carpet a little bit. But I do want musicians and folks in the whole state to know that this is what we call unenforceable. So it's not something that can exist in the contract. I mean, like I said, just pull out the Sharpie and go to town on it
Nice.
because it cannot be in there.
Okay. Cool. Now, there's something else I've been hearing a little bit about. I'm wondering, because I'm completely ignorant of everything. So,
You're doing good so far, bud.
so I've heard tell of like a program called the Seattle Musicians Guaranteed Income Program. I was wondering if you knew anything about it, or if it's related to AFM at all.
That's something that I started working on. That we're talking about some partnerships that we do have. When we can come up with an advocacy program with a group like the Recording Academy, the Grammys.
Oh, okay.
It's really great to advocate with them on a local level. We do at a national level. There's something called the the Fair Pay, Fair Play Act, which is also called the Radio Fairness Act, I think. Or maybe those are two different things. I don't know. I'm talking to you guys, and I'm getting my acts
fine.
mixed up.
Yeah, dude,
But the
that's
long
fine.
and the short of this one is that radios don't have to pay royalties when they go blip, 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 and play your song on a drop, which is insane because you didn't write the song for them to just have access to for free.
Right.
Right, yeah.
So this, this act would require that radio stations, just like movie and TV and other major media outlets, have to just pay the royalty rate to ASCAP and BMI and the PROs, just like anybody else that has a business that uses somebody else's music. We are working with the Recording Academy at the federal level in Washington on that. And, many times you'll see testimonial to that by our president, Ray Hare, alongside of the presidents from the Recording Academy and those kind of agencies, SAG-AFTRA, other artistic labor groups like that. The income program is something that a lot of communities are playing around with. There's a guaranteed income program for artists, broader than the musicians' income program here. We're hoping to get started in Seattle. In San Francisco, I know there's one in, I want to say Minneapolis. New York's playing around with one. I think I heard of one in, I want to say there's one in Texas, but I could be wrong about that. And I know there's some cool stuff happening in Canada, just across the provinces there. Actually, the state Representative Liz Berry is considering and trying to back some legislation that would create one that's a guaranteed income program for everybody statewide.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
So, but what we're trying to do with the musicians program here in Seattle is to recognize that the music trade is at a very precarious spot right now, post-pandemic. If you have noticed, we are not opening venues right now faster than we are closing them.
Yeah.
So performance opportunities are starting to dwindle.
I've made that observation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rents are not going down.
Noticed that as well.
And
Where do you live again?
Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah. And why is that? Because rent fucking expensive here? Is that why?
And granted, though, you know what, though? It's getting that bad down there, too.
Really?
It's like, one bedroom, $1,300 a month or some shit sometimes. And it's like...
well, to that point, any major city that wants to keep the cash pile that is their creative economy vibrant needs to invest in it. So a guaranteed income program.
That's called socialism, and we don't stand for that in America.
Maybe that,
do live in
that very, very well be. The only answer to the question of how do you keep a young worker in a region is you get them paying their bills in that region so they can live there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, something I thought about before moving, too, is, it was in the pandemic, so that was different, obviously, but also, what is, supporting me here as an artist or even just a person in general? But, Seattle's a great city, but, yeah, it's not... There's not a lot, really, for, how much it costs to be here.
A major theme park where you can go get a job playing Lord knows what, but it's a job. It's a job.
Yeah.
Where you can take that income to the bank and say, I would like a loan, please. It's not one where they're like, no, these are gigs. We can't look at this.
Right.
It's a job. So if we were in Los Angeles, there'd be more access to studio recordings. We just live in a part of the country that, unfortunately, is a little behind in some of those things.
Sure.
So finding something like the income program keeps young musicians in Seattle,
as opposed
so
to
we
moving
can
to LA or
stay
Nashville.
the city of music, which I know everybody would like to see.
Yeah.
But if there's all of a sudden this void of musical workers, musical talent in folks our age and younger because nobody could pay their bills here, it's the end of the party.
Yeah.
Now, I think this was you who had talked to me about this a while ago, is Seattle's, on like a state level, like kind of discourages film programs from happening here, like filming and all the music work that goes associated with that, right? So like if you have huge taxes against people shooting in the Northwest or in Seattle specifically, I guess, then that would encourage people to not be here as well musically, because a lot of studio work comes with music, film music work.
Well, that may have been a pre-pandemic conversation.
Yeah, it definitely was.
One thing I could say that I'm happy to report, since we might have had that conversation, if I was the person that said that, is that Washington State has passed I believe it's $20 million a year film incentive program.
Oh, really?
Many of my colleagues in IATSE and SAG-AFTRA and Equity and the folks that work in the nonprofit film side of things, like Washington Filmworks, for example, they're seeing some really great opportunities coming their way to produce episodic film and TV in the Northwest.
Oh, okay.
And with that, there will be some music jobs. There will be some sound jobs. There will be some opportunities for folks that do what we do. Hopefully we're turning that around. Before that funding passed, Washington was 48th in film incentives.
Yeah.
It's still 48th. I know it's 48th in general arts funding.
Really?
Yeah.
That's makes me a little sad, yeah.
We also have actually one of the largest GDPs I think we're like 12th or something like that for arts economies in a state. So California obviously is the biggest one.
Yeah, and then like New York, yeah.
Louisiana, New Orleans,
Tennessee,
Austin, those kind of places,
Yeah.
right. But out of every other major in the mid-teens, a city our size, that's a lot of creative work.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because we are not sitting in the mid-teens for population.
No, we're like 30th or something, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it's
So we're punching above our weight class here.
for the arts, most definitely.
Yeah. And
It's a great way to put it.
yeah, it would be nice to promote that and get
That's what a good chunk of my year looks like when the opportunities come around to advocate for the size and scope of the trade.
Yeah.
And just remind people that it's not just, musicians that are working on, late night TV show talk shows,
Right.
but it's piano teachers that live and work in every community and get everybody going. I know you took piano lessons when you were a kid.
sure
We
did.
all did, right? Or it's, band leaders that are working casinos. I try to remind folks all the time, especially on our coast, like the casinos in the tribal casinos are a huge opportunity, and that's something that we can grow into. There's obviously different rules with interacting with those kind of employers on those communities, but that doesn't mean that we can't find some really positive ways to make sure that musicians are being treated with respect, which is something that I know those communities are always for, is make sure their artists feel welcome and treated right.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah. So what are your AFM / music trade outreach / advocacy things look like? Like what kind of programs do you do to get the word out there?
We have, in the past we were working on one of the program that got me involved in the union in the first place was something called Fair Trade Music, which some of your listeners may or may not know. That was the group that got the loading zones.
Yeah.
Put in
I
front of
remember
a bunch
that,
of the venues. That we worked on that for a number of years to try to come up with, we couldn't get a standardized wage, we were looking to maybe get a standardized agreement.
Sure.
Something that venues and employers could start to see as, these are the types of things that we need to consider. So that was something. I'm presently working on something called the Independent Gigging Musicians, which would be open to anybody to attend that wants to. You can send me an email at nate@local76 493.org.
We'll put that in the description.
If you'd like to attend.
48, 12, 13.
Yeah, and we just talk about stuff that affects freelancers. A lot of what we're doing right now is helping our freelance services coordinator who works out of New York and sort of tries to help locals across the country come up with ideas to help folks that do what we do, more or less, with a website called Venuology. And it's sort of like Rotten Tomatoes for venues.
Oh, nice.
Oh boy, I have
But
a lot
also-
of things to
I'd
say
love
about
to
that.
see some of that.
But also with some more positive
Yeah.
options, like some search functions where we could take some like-minded venues and you could line them up from BC all the way down to
That's a powerful
Southern
function,
California, right? So if you could see the 25 venues, whether they had a back line, whether they had a piano, what they were offering, what they were paying, when the payment came, whether it was electronic, sort all of this
Yeah,
stuff.
maybe like genre tags too. Yeah.
Genre tags, all that stuff. That's what this website does. It's in a little bit of a rebuilding stage right now. We're hoping to have that launched within the next couple of weeks. I've seen it, and it's a powerful tool to be able to go.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going from here down to here. Show me all of the things that do X.
Yeah,
that's
that's
a really
a great
powerful.
That
idea.
sounds really, really great. Yeah,
And to
this
have
is-
it curated, embedded by musicians that are performing there in the community, and then obviously there's if there's a problem, that could be something that we could be all alerted to say, whoa, that was not how we want to see things done.
Right.
So,
And this is being put together by you
the
guys.
AFM. Yeah, this is an AFM website and service that's
Nice.
just out there to the public.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
If you go there now, you'll just get a coming soon page. But I promise
By
you,
the
it is
time
coming.
it's released,
It is
this one
coming.
will be in a while.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure by that time it'll be out, so you can put a thing in a thing. I'm pointing someplace.
Yeah, it'll be like right here. Right here.
Okay.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah. So, one other question is like, I guess, how big of a percentage would you say of musicians like make their living off, like in the union, make their living off just gigging or just teaching or?
Boy, that's a hard question to answer. Most of the members internationally have a single employer, which means they work for a symphony, a park, or they do a lot of work for a contracting agency for a film score. So that kind of, you start from there with the AFM, and then the next question I ask is, well, how many folks in these communities are going to need to find more? And it's most of them. So most of the members in the AFM do some gigging, some freelance work. Each local has its own rules about how to go about informing the office that you're doing something that may not have a contract attached to it. Some very few locals have restrictions for where you can work. I'd say 99% of the locals have a pretty forward-thinking policy for that kind of work. In Seattle, we acknowledge that there aren't that many opportunities to work under a CBA here in Seattle, and when you do, it's generally a smaller house. So we're open to do whatever work we need to do outside of a couple of us that have some staff obligations. Rock and roll.
Sweet.
and roll.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually all the questions I have on here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot. I learned a lot.
Doing pretty good.
I
Look
know,
at that.
Yeah.
I know you're short on time too,
No,
so
I think we're doing okay.
okay.
Nice.
Well, I come way more informed than I was going in.
Yeah,
I
no.
think so. This has been awesome. Thank you for teaching us.
No, happy to do it. I guess one thing I might do if you're looking for a plug.
Yeah.
Plug away.
Right now, and I'm sure whenever this episode comes out,
It'll be about a month, I think.
so there are pretty much any trade that you do in the theatrical world, in the arts world, can more or less be represented by one of the handful of unions that exist in our sector, our trade sector. And one of those is called IATSE, which is the International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees.
Please need to work on better namings.
It's more or less sound technicians and crew, other types of crew.
So like production,
But also they have they represent costumers as well.
Oh, cool.
So folks that do that kind of stuff. They also want to, surprise, they represent the crew at the stadium, most of the stadiums, including Lumen Field, and they are looking for workers all summer long.
Really?
All summer long.
Okay, yeah.
It's could be entry-level work starting at $22 an hour. All you need to have is a sturdy pair of boots and know left from right.
Well, I'm out.
Yeah, sorry.
I gotta hold the hand.
That's okay. But if you're interested, go to bit.ly/IA15work.
Yeah,
We're going to have a lot of links in this
link
description.
will be right there. Yeah.
It's a really easy form to fill out. I think there's like a 5-question form that's just sort of how old are you? Do you have the, it's very basic. And if you come with other stage skills, like many musicians may, they'll have a way that they can make sure that you're put in the right spot.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. I guess we should also ask just like, hey, if I want to join the union.
If you want to join the union, go to 76-493.org, and there's it's just PayPal. Just send us your, you can either choose to join quarterly or annually. The one thing I will say to everybody is if you're just joining because you want to support unions, you see what's going on with Amazon, with Starbucks, you just want to be a part of it and get a chance to learn about what unions are, you're more than welcome to join just for that. And there's really no obligation. We'd love to have you continually, but there's no obligation to stay beyond what you're comfortable with if you're not being represented on a job site. So one thing I would just point out is that just communicate with the office that you might be coming and going. And they'll tell you, just make sure you send us an email when you're ready to hit pause on your membership so that some fees don't continue. It's a little bit like a old school video rental service where if you just keep the video, you keep kind of paying for it.
Yeah.
So you want to just make sure that you're just communicating what your intentions are with membership, and we'd love to have you just for whatever you'd like to see what we're about. There's
Awesome.
opportunities to just be a part of some larger labor actions. Right now, my friends at Unite Here, who, among other things, organize hotel workers, they're actually working with a producer called Homegrown, which is actually, I believe it's a sandwich kind of business, and they're do business out of Cafe Vita, and they're actually trying to help those workers achieve a little more equity on the job site. And so just by going to the MLK labor website, you can check out all kinds of opportunities, and that would be something as a member, we could more than get you some awareness of. And I can't tell you, I've yet to meet a labor group that doesn't want to meet more musicians, because we can make a lot of noise and attract a big crowd, and those are things that the movement wants. So the more musicians that want to be a part of it, if anybody out there that hears this has ever had the inclination, I'd love to get some of my buddies together and go get a little picket line jam session going on. Give me a call. We can probably put some money down.
Awesome. Very cool.
But we can find some funds for some stuff like that. That's one of the things that we try to do is support our, I always, an example I always use is like, there are so many musicians that have overlap with teachers. Right? A lot of us teach ourselves. A lot of us, our partners, spouses are teachers or healthcare workers. And there are actions all the time for those employers. And I know from personal experience that our services would be put to use in a great way. So if anybody's interested in any of that, please find me and let me know how I can help.
All right. Well, you all know what to do.
Yeah. All right, so that pretty much ends the main topic here.
Yes.
Now we're going to move on into what we call, the rants of the week or something like that. And I'm going to start us out by involving you, hopefully, on my rant. This isn't Music Sucks and I Want to Die without hopefully a little drama. I want to hear about, again, this is the only thing I'm even remotely familiar with, is the separation in the 80s between the AFM and the Symphony Union.
Oh. Well, it was a little before my time there, so I can't speak to 100% what happened. And I don't want to speak for anybody that may have a different opinion, but, my understanding of it is that it's hard to pursue a lot of work in film scoring if you're not in Los Angeles.
Sure.
And my understanding is that came into the decision to separate from the AFM as much as anything.
Oh, interesting.
I also, there's probably some there's some interpersonal political stuff that I know I've kind of heard whisper of working in the office that I really couldn't speak to.
Sure, We'll leave that up to the imagination,
Being the 40 years ago that it was when those conversations took place.
Right.
So, best that I can understand is that, it was just some musicians that were looking for a different opportunity. And they're have their own labor group, the guild, that represents the theater, opera, ballet, and there's nothing that's stopping any group from starting their own labor group like that. So
the podcast labor group.
Well,
maybe, dude.
It came up. It's not unlike I was thinking there's probably some potential jurisdiction with journalists and with broadcasters.
Sure, that makes sense.
So,
yeah.
Man, I was hoping for the drunken fist fights outside of the labor hall kind
I
of thing.
doubt it gets that exciting.
Damn it.
well, no, I think it did.
Oh, shit.
I think it did. I just don't know it. I just don't know it.
Well,
It's
Jake,
so
you have
long
homework.
in the
I got
past.
homework. Next episode, I will bring the knowledge, and I'll tag you on Twitter and be like, "Yo, this is the spice.
I mean,
This is the spice.
It's just all been outside of a couple of voices. It's all just sort of been hearsay, and
Sure.
this sort of happened, and that sort of happened, and would we love to have everybody back? Of course we would.
Yeah.
But is our region like every other region? Absolutely not.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Gotcha. Rant, go.
only sort of related to music, more just society in general, I guess, at this point in our lives. I was watching this documentary on Hulu from like 2014, I want to say, called The Act of Killing, about the Indonesian communist genocide in the 90s, and really well done. Great documentary, brutal, obviously. But what the rant is...
we're pretty far from music at this point.
Well, communist, labor right. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God! Whoa!
But it's Hulu, so there was an ad before, which there's going to be an ad, and it was like,
oh no!
Again, it's not like this is just society. It's nothing to do with. It was Megan Thee Stallion, nothing against her or anything, but it starts and it's her advertising Cash App, and it starts with like the TikTok robot voice, you know?
Oh yeah,
they actually use that, and then she's like, "Get money, invest, Cash App, blah blah blah." And then I sit there and watch this horrific. It's just
the juxtaposition.
I don't know. I hate life. It's a bummer, man. It's a bummer.
Good enough.
Oh, dude, yeah. I can see that being a little jarring, perhaps.
Yeah, but really good documentary. Definitely recommend if you're feeling up to it.
sounds like it's an early morning kind of a
Oh,
watch.
Yeah, nice and light, you know. What about you, Nate? Do you have any rants for us?
I do. I actually got a good one that's very music specific.
Yes.
It's
not about some...
No, I just got done playing at Art Museum downtown.
Cool.
And, it's that thing where you're locked out of the venue because it's before the event starts. I get it. But there's like 3/4 of a band on the other side of a window, 15 feet from the door I'm standing at, going like, "Can you let me in?"
Yeah, and you have like gear with you.
I'm standing.
Yeah.
I've got gear. I'm whatever. Sure. I'm like I understand you can't let people in, but like you can see the trumpet player.
Yeah.
You can see the band setting up right there, and I'm a part of it.
Yeah.
Why can't do it? I can't do it. You got to go around. You got to go around. And I'm just like, if anybody that I am responsible to saw this interaction, they'd be like, go let the person in so they can start the event on time.
Yeah.
It's this power trip that you get on the other side of a buzzer. And you're like, can you please let me in?
Yeah.
I'm literally 15 feet from where I need to go.
Yeah, and I don't want to walk 300 feet.
And I don't want to walk all the way around the building to get in. I'm looking at the clock. I still have to set everything up because I had to go move the car because you don't want me leaving the parking garage. All these things.
Yep.
Okay.
So I see this as a common experience.
Yes. So load in and load out is possibly the worst part of every single gig.
Right. Well, as you were saying earlier, like that's part of our day doing a show. Like it's not like you're saying you're not there for an hour. You're for all of that,
One of the things that a union does, any good arts union does, is negotiate cartage for the large instruments.
Oh, God.
Or a day of cartage for the large instruments.
Yeah.
Like my colleague just got a whole day and a truck sent because it was like every piece of percussion odd piece of percussion from this guy's house over a 60-year career or whatever it's been, and he was just like, it took the whole day.
Yeah. And like even when I was talking about the like how I'm paying union dues but I don't get anything, and then you're like, actually you park there, you know what I mean? They negotiated parking for people that work there. That could be something that could change eventually. So
If you get paid to load your stuff in outside of immediately before the day when you're supposed to play it, that didn't automatically happen. So
yeah, exactly.
Just all those little things.
Yeah.
You don't think about them when you're like hustling to the gig. But when you're sitting there talking to a schmuck like me, I can be like, no. I can tell you what union officers do and have done and do across the country, and any of them would love to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge, man. Like, this has been really helpful just because, again, I just didn't know. I did not know most
I'm
of this
always
stuff
down to
existed.
talk. If anybody has any questions, please find me. We'll go out and get coffee. Keep doing this.
Yeah. So this is actually one last kind of question related back to our main topic. Format's gone.
My rant is Jake being all over the place.
That's never happened before.
Ad-libbing.
Yeah.
We're going off the set list here.
So would you say that there's an issue with it's probably just a me issue, but would you say there's an issue with getting the knowledge to people in here? Like,
it's really hard.
It's really hard?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this, because this is not easy stuff. This is my job, and I bash my head against the wall trying to read legislation and learn about things that affect us and things that don't. This is complicated stuff. And I would always say, like, if you want to learn about why our thing is the way it is, let's just go get some pizza, and I can print some stuff out, and we can just do like a little study session. We can try to find out the answer together, because it's a lot easier to do this with your friends than it is just in your,
on the New York Times article number 435.
The stuff's really, really dense, and there's footnotes and citations and all the stuff for days, and it really is
and even like the language is hard to read.
Yeah, it's just I always say let's just get a little crew together and find the answer together.
Yeah,
Totally.
that sounds awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's move on to listening of the week. Why don't you start, Matt?
I've been listening to Eric Johnson. I don't know if you aren't familiar. He had that one Guitar Hero song, Cliffs of Dover. So you might know that song. Really great guitar player. I was listening to his first album, Tones. And he's from that 80s shred era where it's just a lot of virtuosic shit. But he's always more melodic in a way, I think. Like, he writes, it's almost borderline cheesy fusion sometimes.
Love it.
But he's very, like, it's not Steve Vai level of just like, look at all the crazy shit I can do. He like writes songs, I would say, and he sings a little too. His singing song, but his melodies, his soloing, it's all just very like nice, tight, melodic. And that first album has all the cheesy '80s synths you would ever want.
Hell yeah, dude!
Check it out.
Awesome. What about you, Nate? What have you been listening to?
Let's see here. Well, my wife bought Mario Kart for the DS.
Okay.
And those cats had one hell of a studio blow, because that music is insane.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
It's insane. And whoever that trumpet player is on that game earned every cent, because they abused that motherfucker. That was nuts.
Yeah. I love the what is it? This like Dolphin Shoals or something like that. There's this fucking sax solo that is so disgusting. It's like a samba track.
Oh, there's like YouTube videos of people playing it.
Yeah,
I honestly was like, whoever got to put this score together must have had a blast, because it's just like every cheesy everything just crammed into a racetrack sound, or like a video game theme thing, and it's a lot of fun. Other than that, I suppose I've been listening to a big band arranger named Tom Kubis.
Okay. And
Straight over the plate.
Straight over the plate.
All right.
Sweet. I've been listening to a band called Dinosaur Pileup. They're a British band from like late 2000s, and actually they released an album in 2019 that I was listening to called Celebrity Mansions. It's like they're kind of a weird mix of everything. They center around like hard alt rock kind of stuff, and then they like branch into weird, like they have like weird baby metal influence, and then like it's almost kind of like irreverent, somewhat comedic element to it, and but it's kind of grounded in an alt rock thing.
Okay.
It's
Sounds up my alley.
It's a very fun listen.
Nice.
Very, very silly.
I like that.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been Music Sucks and I Want to Die.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Nate.
Thank you so much, Nate. We learned a lot.
Anytime.
We learned a lot.
Anytime.
I feel honestly like way more positive about the Union than I did coming into this episode.
And we'll make sure to post a bunch of links to everything and
Yep.
all our stuff.
You know,
and
there may
so-
be some, like I said,
Yeah.
we're always working on stuff, so we may have some news coming out next couple of months. It'd be great to just kind of keep feeding you stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
send,
more
send it
people-
to us, dude.
Yeah,
we'll
the
put
more
it
That'd be
people that,
awesome.
like,
We'll
the
definitely
more
help
people
with
that know about this stuff, that's how it stays.
Yeah.
For sure, we'll do.
Yeah,
do.
we'll send it out, man.
Cool.
Awesome. Anyway, I'm Jake.
I'm Matt.
He's
I'm Nate.
There we go. This is Music Sucks and I Want to Die. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.